To CNN's Jill Doherty in Moscow. Jill, I want to ask you about this alarming order by Vladimir Putin for Russia's deterrence forces to be on high alert. Those forces, as we've been discussing, include nuclear weapons. What is your sense of how the Russians are explaining this? Does it have any credibility whatsoever? It just sounds like saber rattling and perhaps a sign of desperation.
Well, it has, relevance. He is the commander-in-chief, and he does have two of the largest, the United States and Russia, have the biggest nuclear arsenals in the world. So when he says things like that, it is very serious, and I think that's how it should be interpreted. And what he is saying is really a direct threat. Just to be precise, he's ordering his nuclear deterrent forces to be put on what he calls special combat regime. So that's a very high level of alert. And the reason he said that was because he said we are having aggressive statements and actions by NATO, and also these sanctions coming from the United States and from Europe. And you really have to say that those sanctions are going to very much bite. Tonight, it's very late, Sunday night, early Monday morning. Tomorrow morning, when the markets and the trading places where Russians trade their rubles begin to open, it could be pretty grim. So I think the president is trying to respond to a lot of this. And the United States did have an response, the White House saying that this is essentially a manufactured threat that really doesn't exist. So luckily, there doesn't seem to be a tit for tat. The United States could have, of course, said, well, we're going to go on super alert as well. But they did not do that. At least at this point, they're not doing that. And then another thing, Jim, that I think is really notable, we've been watching a lot of Russian reports on Russian state-owned and operated TV. And they have this kind of divided vision or version of what the Ukrainian forces are. Because in their reports from the eastern part, from that Donbass breakaway region, they're depicting them, they never call them the Ukrainian army, they call them nationalists, and they depict them as fierce monsters who kill and attack people. And then the other image is of regular Ukrainian forces in the areas that we've been reporting on, Kiev and other main cities. And they are depicted by the Russians as kind of weaklings who give up and, turn over to the Russian forces surrendering. It's a very odd vision. And so today, that all kind of came together as the military briefed, as it does every day, and for the first time admitted that they actually have lost forces. They've been killed, they've been wounded, but there were no numbers that they gave. But I think that is significant that they did admit that that's happening. They added, of course, that it's far fewer than the Ukrainians are having killed and wounded. Jim?
And Jill, these protests that have been cropping up in Russia, just remarkable to see. Typically, we don't see this sort of thing. We're showing some pictures now of what came in out of St. Petersburg today, and Russian police going in there and just roughing up these protesters. But they're locking arms in these images that we're showing our viewers, and seem very determined to make their voices heard.
They are, and they're actually very brave to do that because, ever since the protests, remember there were protests not too long ago for Navalny, the more, and I would say, repressive and actually very brutal. You can look at some of that footage, and that is meant, you take these, some of the young people, put them in detention. They're held for sometimes a couple of days, and sometimes in conditions that are not very good. And then they are warned that this will be a black mark on your work record, on your school record, and that is one way that they're trying to convince the young people not to get involved in this. But there is really an anti-war movement, you'd have to say. It is not the majority of Russians, we have to say that. But it is significant that this is happening, not only among young people, but there's some others, middle-aged people who are out there as well.
Right, we were just showing some footage a few moments ago of grandmothers being yanked off the streets by these police officers, people of all ages. Jill Doherty Thank you so much for that reporting. We appreciate it from Moscow. And up